Sister Lorraine, thank you so much for talking to femLINKpacific here at the Pacific Feminist Forum. What's been important about the Pacific Feminist Forum? Why are you here?
Why am I here is because of the fact that I work with women, across Bougainville. And it's important for me to attend the forum, learn and understand how we can organize women more effectively around building up the women's movement. And also creating that space where women can come and talk about themselves, what they do, and where they would like to go. So for me, this forum has created the space where I'm learning a lot, and I'm learning from what others are doing, and I'm, kind of like thinking, how can I do this in Bougainville, and how can I take that and incorporate that into what I am already doing. So that, for me, it's a learning experience.
We also have a lot to learn in terms of how women, like you, like Helen, Agnes Titus, Josephine Sarivi, also organized yourselves in the height of the war, in the height of the crisis, and really contributed to, that bringing peace, ending the war. So I'm interested to know that when women are able to organize in that kind of serious conflict, war-like situation, what is the kind of support, for organizing that has been needed since then, and why do you feel that you're still having to learn to see how women organize?
In Bougainville, when we did it during the crisis, I think we did it from what actually drove the women was the end to the violence, the war. Because for us, violence, when the war started in Bougainville, for us, violence was like a foreign thing. I mean, there was violence in the families and the normal domestic violence. But this kind of violence, we did not know. So but what really drove the women, what drove us, was we just wanted an end to the war. And I think the way we did it was, we did it our own way, the grassroots way. Getting together, talking about how we should go and talk to the responsible people. How we should talk to them about ending the war because of this and that and that and that. So that's what we did. But also, starting in 1994, we started going overseas. Like Agnes and Helen went to Beijing. I went to another conference in the Philippines that same year, where sisters from all over the Pacific and Asia Pacific gathered together, where sisters from countries where there was armed conflict, like Burma, Vietnam previously, Cambodia previously, and the ongoing conflict in the Philippines. And I went to that one, and I learned how they were working with women in armed conflict and how they were mobilizing. And then also through the Asia Pacific Development Center. At that time, Dr. Vanessa Griffin was there, and she also invited us to that learning space. And then we learned, and then we mobilized women a bit more effectively, and at a level where we could talk to government, we could talk to the factions, and then that we could educate women around, gender-based violence in times of armed conflict. How to end that and how to end violence and that. And also we started establishing social services. Like in the beginning, we were doing humanitarian work, like sending soap or salt or clothes or medicine, all those things. And we didn't so much as go into the care centers and that. But by 1994, I was like going to the care centers and, working with the women there. But we didn't, in those days, we didn't think about the trauma, caused by the violence. And it was only later in 1996 that started coming home to us. So, all those things that we had to do in those days. And we did that during the conflict, but now that Bougainville is moving that way towards referendum, I think also there's another level of organizing and mobilizing and educating women, educating communities around what is it really.
So I'm just wondering, because it's been a while since the peace agreement was signed and since the first election for the Autonomous Bougainville government, how much do people remember about the peace agreement and the, if you want, the gains, what women contributed for the peace agreement, for the constitution, and what is it that needs to be revisited and needs to be supported or amplified?
I mean, if you go to the rural communities and you ask the people, what do they know about the peace agreement? Very few people know about the peace agreement. I mean, you could also look at it this way. The educated elite will know a lot about the peace agreement. But the grassroots, they don't know enough about the peace agreement. So just now, in the most recent times, we've been advocating to the government that they need to take this education, they need to take this awareness to the people, to educate them about, the peace agreement and that. I mean, we try to do that in the work that we do with women, with youth, with men across Bougainville. Talk to them a little bit about even the constitution, the peace agreement, all those things. But it is important for our government to do that. And even now for referendum, they are telling us we cannot just go and do the awareness on the referendum. There has to be a standard format that everyone has to follow.
So are women like yourselves and other women who are part of bringing peace to Bougainville, are you well represented in the organizing for the kind of civic education for the referendum?
To date, we are not really, we're not part of that process. But and I think the government needs to look at how they can engage women a bit more effectively in that process. They've been running some workshops recently, and women are taking part at different levels. With the support from DFAT, I think they have money through one program where they've been doing that. But also, I think for people like myself who have been there through the process, with Agnes and Helen, I think we at our level also need to contribute at another level towards that. Like one of the things that really worries me all the time, and I talk to Agnes about it because we are working together, is the complex issues around peace building.
Tell us about that, sister, because you're talking really, it's almost, peace doesn't come naturally with the signing of the peace agreement. As you said, there's a lot of work that starts, including the rebuilding of communities, the counseling of the combatants as well as the affected community. I remember Rose Pihe saying how there was a generation of women now who had not gone through education. So how do you even build women's leadership? So what is all of that looking like?
I mean, there are three, you could look at it at three levels. And one level is what happens in country, like in Bougainville itself. Like Bougainville is not it's an island, or it's like, it will be almost like it's a nation within a nation. It's not a standalone. And even if we get independence or whatever, you're still going to have to relate with Papua New Guinea. So you have to look at all those, those complex issues around.
So one is purely geographical.
Yes, yes. And the relationship that you have to continue to build with Papua New Guinea. But also what happens that you need to look at what's beyond you, like the Pacific region and that. And I always think about like peace and security in light of peace and security. What is it there? Bougainville, the ABG has a strategy on peace and security. They have the framework for that. But the implementation is the challenge. I mean, how do you start building peace and security, and getting communities to understand that, and also to start putting in place the systems that were broken down during the crisis. So that's what I mean by when we look at Bougainville itself. People lost a lot when the crisis came. People in the rural areas, villages, Bougainville was well established before the crisis. They lost their economic system. The health system went down. The social systems went down. Not just the social system, the services that the government provided, but the traditional systems. Like, for example, today the chiefs will tell you, we lost our leadership to the power of the gun. That has not been reconciled, and that's what I mean. We need to work with traditional leaders around reconciling that, so that they can now regain their confidence and, take on their leadership roles as they used to.
Are these I often think about our work is about preventing the resurgence of violence. What you are doing, what the women like Hella and Agnes are doing in whether it's addressing domestic violence or providing psychosocial support or even education programs, you're working so that that never happens again.
That's exactly what we are doing.
What would you be saying to like the UN and other government agencies to really understand those root causes that you're trying to address?
I'll give this example. In the southern part of Bougainville, which is completing a project with UN Women, and it's been like almost 24 months we've been doing that. And it's a project that we call it Planim Save Come Up Strong, Plant the Knowledge Grow Strong. And the concept of this project is to integrate peace-building learning with gender-based violence learning, trauma healing, conflict transformation, all those things. And, family and sexual violence, all those things. And in the communities where we are working, we've done that. And we piloted that in 2 local level governments in the south. And I think the communities have benefited very well from that.
And where are these specific communities?
One is in Buin, Baobake, in one COE area, and one is in CY. It's Kopi COE. And the communities, the people are actually telling us, this is what should have happened immediately after the crisis. Healing justice, healing what has been destroyed during the crisis. Because they are telling us, because in the learning we've also included, like we call it, the 7 pillars of peace and security. Political security, economic security, it all.
Yes.
All those things.
Human security pillars.
Yes, we used the books from you.
Fantastic.
And we incorporated that into our learning.
Using the femLINK
Yes, and we incorporated that. And when people discuss that and they talk about that, and they say, so how can we actually build a nation if even the political system is shaky, and the people who are representing us in parliament are actually people who supported the conflict, who fought the conflict. Some of them held the guns in their hands. So how can we do that if it's not reconciled? How can we make our political system become a fair system, a just system, when
people-centered rather than a military
centered? Yes, exactly. That kind of question comes out in the minds of the people or in the voices of the people, and then they talk about, we've lost everything, our economic system, even our traditional economic systems, our monetary systems we've lost. And it's very hard for us to build it up. And that fact is very true. Even only in Bougainville today, you see that the person with the biggest amount of money can do something. But all those people who had money during the crisis and they lost it, they can't.
So we have to really find that balance in a lot of our, across the Pacific, in terms of balancing the traditional and the political system.
Exactly.
You can't say it's either or. We have to find a model where both can work in harmony. Within all of this, as we look at the referendum scheduled for next year,
2019.
2019. What needs to be done then between 2017, 2018 to really help prepare people's thinking? Because they almost need to understand that the referendum will give you options, but you can have a voice in what those options should look like. So how do you prepare?
And that's exactly what we are trying to work towards now. Even in the work that we do, we try to incorporate learnings around referendum and how referendum in some other countries where they've done that and all that. But more so to educate our people that, referendum is not about voting for independence. Referendum gives you the opportunity to work out and to vote. Is it really what you want, independence for Bougainville, or you remain an autonomous region of Bougainville? And I think that's what needs to happen. And it needs to happen in a space where people are not frightened. Like, for example, the people in the communities will tell you, but how can we go and vote for referendum when the guns are still there? The guns are still very much at large. We can't. There's no.
So does there need to be another weapons disposal program?
Yes, definitely. I think they're trying to work around that. Who owns those guns and how they can be, So those are some of the things. Because the people also say, what we also worry about is the aftermath of the voting. What if it turns out the people say, we want to remain autonomous. We are not ready for independence. What will happen to those people who really strive and struggle for that? Will they have that understanding that that's what the population wants? Because, it did not take the population of Bougainville to close the mine. It took like a small group of people to close the mine, which was good. They closed it, it's okay. But
then take up weapons.
Exactly, and start the fighting.
Yeah. So, in terms of then coming back to that civic education, because there's such a vital need to ensure people understand the peace agreement, that women's contributions to bringing peace and sustaining peace in Bougainville is not lost. What should be those critical components of that civic education program?
I think at the moment what we are doing with women human rights defenders and what BWF is doing with women across Bougainville, those are some of the important things that needs to continue to happen, because it continues to raise awareness, it helps women to become conscious of what's happening and what's going to happen, and to keep women alert so that they also feel that they have rights and that they can speak up for their rights.
I haven't been to Bougainville for a while, but I can remember the trip I did all the way round up until the no-go zone and then coming back round back to Buka. The infrastructure had been, it was disastrous. And when we've talked about the suitcase radio or community radio, I know there's one that was set up, but it's not a mobile station in Tinputs. I think they set up one in Tinputs. Has the infrastructure improved enough to be able to ensure that information, communication is reaching all the people all the time? And what would you like to see improved, or how can that be supported?
What I want to say here is that in Bougainville currently, in terms of communication, the government is trying to do its best. The people in the communities, radio was the most effective most effective way of communication in Bougainville before. Because you could send messages, the news, everything, you know, announcements, and it radio before the crisis, and even some years in the crisis could reach the whole of the island. And now they are telling us they don't have that kind of equipment to do that. They are trying to install one equipment at the moment. They've done that, but we are still not getting the radio. To get the radio back to its level where it was before.
So it's a transmission issue.
Yes.
So there is no radio Bougainville.
There's a radio Bougainville. It broadcasts, but you can hear it as far as Arawa.
Okay.
But not to the remotest part. And you can still pick it up in South Bougainville. They are putting the transmitter that will bring it to the way it's standard before. There's also a private radio station, New Dawn FM.
Yes.
They are broadcasting from Buka and Arawa. But it depends on where you are, and you can pick it up clearly. Mobile phones, DTCell is all around Bougainville. That's very good. But in certain locations, you can't pick it up. So that kind of communication is there at the moment.
Yeah.
But not effective enough. The Office of Information with ABG, they have a mobile radio station. It's in a car, and they can travel around the island, and they will broadcast. From where they are sitting, they will broadcast throughout some locations.
Okay.
But they need to do it a bit more open and more effective.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
yes.
Is it them just transmitting, or is the community involved?
And that's another thing, like the community needs to be involved. And I think in some communities they are involving them, like they go and they broadcast on what's happening in that community and that, but I think they need to involve the community a little bit more. They are also producing like a newsletter that goes, I think it's a monthly newsletter, and they sometimes bring it to our center, so we do the distribution where we are, or where we go to, we take the copies with us, and it's in Tok Pigeon, so that's good. Some of it is in Tok Pigeon and some is in English, so it's good for the people who don't read English.
Sometimes they say that the media will come in when there's a conflict or there's a crisis, but when it's peacetime, and when it's about really strengthening, building sustainable peace, you don't get the coverage.
Exactly.
What kind of media coverage would you like to see, or what's the story that should be told now in terms of what's going on in Bougainville?
The biggest thing that needs to be done now is to communicate the preparation of the referendum, and broadcast it to the people and tell the people, explain what referendum is, because not a lot of people understand that. And also autonomy, because people have not understood autonomy enough. And also to continue to communicate the information about the peace agreement. What's in the peace agreement that people need to understand, because I think also many times we don't understand that. If we understand the peace agreement properly, we understand the autonomy, what it is, and referendum, like from our level as women and working in this area, we could, when we understand those things properly, we can actually advocate the government. Like now in Bougainville, we've understood gender-based violence, and we've been working on it. So far, with the work that we've done, and with the help of UN Women, there is a policy on gender equality, women, peace and security. ABG, it was passed 3 years ago. And this year we are reviewing the national plan on that. And also to make sure that there is money to implement the plan. In the last 3 years, the plan was never implemented by the government, but we, civil society, women's organizations, yes, we are the ones who are implementing the plan. So in light of the implementation, we then we fed the reports into the review of the plan. So like for Nazareth Centre last year, after working with women for 3 years since 2013, we did an assessment on women, peace and security with all our women human rights defender, so that all that report has been, the recommendations have been put into the review, this review. And also for this one, we have, ABG has passed policy on juvenile justice, and Nazareth Centre, we work directly with that and help with that. And we have also worked with the policy on safe houses, women's refuge. It's now with the minister to make sure that she took it once to the, what do you call them, executive council, but then they, you know, yeah, because they don't understand. So now we have the law and justice sector program. The department is helping us. We've set up a small committee that will liaise with the minister and then work closely with other ministers in the executive council to understand it, so that, you know, they can move it. Yeah, and also because the Department of Community Development is not resourced enough, so we have that problem. Like when I worked on those two,
it's not in the national budget, you won't get it in the provincial budget, will you?
Yes, so we all those two policies, we worked with them from the law and justice sector, and then the one on juvenile justice went by the law and justice channel to ABG. Now they push the policies because it comes under community development, social services. And now it's sitting there because they are always telling us they are not resourced. And we are telling them, but we are the resources, you can help us. And I said, you can get Agnes Titus, who once was a minister in the government, to work with the current minister and mentor and coach the current minister how to go and talk over there. Those, you know, we can use all those means.
Resources are not just financial.
Exactly.
You know, everything you do, Sister Lorraine, really resonates with this year's theme for the 16 days of activism. So when we talk about making education safe for all, in the context of Bougainville, not just the girls that go to school today, but the women who lost out on education because of the war, the men and the boys as well. So how would you, what's your message in terms of making education safe for all? What does that really mean beyond the 16 Days campaign?
Recently I had a discussion with my sister, my real sister, and I was telling my sister, you know what I said to her? One day I saw your daughter, your eldest daughter, and I became very sad because she went as far as year 10. And she was supposed to go to technical training. And she didn't go. She went and had a child with her boyfriend. And then another daughter, the second one, not actually the second one, the third one, did the same thing. She's done year 10, and now she has a child. And I said to her, you know, my dear, that's not breaking the cycle that we broke. We broke the cycle, you know. Our mother was educated, she went to primary school, but didn't, beyond that, no, and not enough reading and writing skills. But we broke that cycle. You went on, I went on. We're supposed to be helping your daughters to carry on that cycle. And we're supposed to make education, you know, safe for them. You know, all this boyfriend business and all that, we have a problem with that. I said, doesn't that man have a father and mother who could educate him that he has to wait for this girl to finish education, get a job, and be able to look after family? Now they can look after family. You have to look after them for their, you know, you are now the grandmother looking after the grandchildren with your money because you are working. I said, that's not helping us. And lately I had another discussion with that same sister of mine, with her second daughter, second child, who is attending teachers college, but she wants to go to university to be a lawyer. And that's the one that I'm really coaching and mentoring. And this year I happened to meet her. I was coming back from somewhere in PNG and met her in Port Moresby. She was stranded. And so I took her with her other students and tried to help them to be accommodated some way. And now I ended up sleeping with with her in one place. And then I said to her, my dear, I'm really glad that you have that dream, you want to go ahead, you want to move on, you want to become a lawyer. I said, I really want to support you, to invest in you, because you know what? You will break that cycle. You will continue to break that cycle where education is safe for you, you can have it, you can get somewhere, you can be someone in your life. You can be able to support yourself and others. And I said, look at your two sisters. The cycle that we broke, your mother and myself, you didn't break. They didn't break. They're kind of like going back to that, where their grandmother was before. And I said, but your grandmother's time is her time. Now is your time. So, we have, in Bougainville, yes, it's a huge problem around that. And we try to work with girls. We have a small program at our center we started last year, where we have girls who are learning. They're doing civic education, but at the same time doing skills training, because we are telling them, you dropped out from year 8. We have a very bad system in our country where teenage girls or boys too are leaving school at year 8 and year 10 and year 12, and they're just going back to the village and nothing happens for them. So we are trying to work with some of those youth, boys and girls. They are doing skills training in sewing, carpentry, and woodwork. At least at the end of it, they will have a skill, and they can earn money for themselves. They can find a job somewhere if they want, or be self-employed. Yeah, so we are trying all those things.
And it's also then curtailing that cycle of violence, the bigger.
Exactly.
Because as you talk about the boys, it's also about that last generation
exactly.
also who became the combatants.
And the children that I'm actually talking about are the children of those people who grew up, who were just like, they were in their early adolescence.
Yes.
When the crisis came, and those are their children.
So that lost generation, losing out on education,
exactly,
are not placing the value back. So you're having to reclaim all of that.
Exactly.
And make education both a priority.
Yes.
And yeah. Yes. Sister Lorraine, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.